So up to about 10 years ago or so, golf club manufacturers had made for matching shafts in their drivers, in their fairway woods, in their hybrids. They had a Callaway shaft in their Callaway club. They had a TaylorMade shaft in their TaylorMade club. But today, when you look around, you don't see any made for shafts anymore, right? Everything seems to be an upgraded aftermarket premium, some kind of shaft other than just a plain old made for shaft. So what's going on here? Did the golf club companies just decide to be really nice and give everybody these upgraded shafts free of charge? Well, before you start thinking it's all sunshine and lollipops and free upgraded aftermarket shafts for everyone, we're going to talk about what's going on. So let's go. Hi everyone, welcome to the Mobile Club Maker. I'm AJ. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. So let me just start out by saying this is not going to be a video where I am talking about should you buy an upgraded aftermarket shaft versus one of the stock shafts that come in a driver, fairway wood, what have you. What I want to talk about today really is what is going on with the club companies, what is going on with the shaft companies as far as the shafts that you're getting in these drivers, fairway woods, hybrids off the rack, the stock options, because unfortunately there's a lot of deception going on, and this has been going on for a long time. We're going to cover just sort of dipping our toe in it as far as how far back this issue goes and how it still goes on today. Now, this stuff has all been documented. It's been brought up numerous times by different people. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of people who don't understand, don't believe, or just don't know that these deceptive practices are going on, have been going on, and are still going on. So what I wanted to do today was just sort of kind of highlight some of the ways that the shaft and club companies can be a little bit less than perfectly forthcoming with what they're offering you with their new driver, let's say. Okay, so we start out years ago and everything is basically made for shafts, right? Callaway shaft in the Callaway head, TaylorMade shaft in the TaylorMade head. And that was how it just was. There weren't really aftermarket shafts. There were a few out there, but it wasn't something readily available. It wasn't just sitting there on the rack. It was kind of a chore to try and get one ordered in that club. It would take weeks to get it. If you wanted an aftermarket shaft, you had to go buy the shaft separately and then have it installed by a club builder. From there, you kind of move into this co-marketed, co-designed phase where you have shafts that are now, it's not just a Callaway shaft in that Callaway driver, it's a Aldila, say Aldila NV shaft with maybe Callaway written on it somewhere or in Callaway colors to match the driver, but sort of a cross-pollination, sort of a blend of, you know, it's Callaway, but it's also, look, it's this aftermarket Aldila NV shaft. And you saw that all the time also. And that's where things really started to get sort of gray, because in some cases you had things like TaylorMade's TP line where you had these shafts that had those names on it, that had the Aldila, had Fujikura, had Mitsubishi on it, and it had a TaylorMade paint job and it had some TaylorMade logos, but it was in fact actually the real deal aftermarket, more expensive premium shaft. But in some cases, it had all that same stuff on it and it wasn't that shaft. So all of a sudden things get very hazy. You move forward into recent time, including up to today, and you no longer see these co-design shafts. You no longer see these made for shafts. What you see now are just independent shafts, right? If you pick up a Callaway driver now, you're not going to see a Callaway shaft in there. You're going to see a Project X shaft in there. If you pick up a TaylorMade driver, you're not going to see a TaylorMade shaft in there. You're going to see a Mitsubishi shaft in there. So things have shifted again, right? Because now they've gone away from any sort of co-mingling with the club brand and the shaft brand, and they're just saying, here's the head, and maybe here's the grip from the club company, and then here's the shaft completely independent. Now that would make you think, and that does make you think, and this is their idea, that, oh, I'm getting something better. I'm getting an aftermarket shaft, right? This is an actual shaft. I can see it here. I can maybe see it on the manufacturer's website with a MSRP on it so you could buy it. This must be a better shaft. So this all sounds great, right? It sounds like you're getting these aftermarket shafts at the same price. The problem is that's not exactly what's happening, and in many cases that is not at all what's happening. So I'm going to now show you just a few different examples of how this sort of shaft bait and switch, this sort of deception happened, different forms it could take. Okay, so the first example I'm going to show you, these first couple examples are sort of, you could call them watered down versions. This is sort of what I refer to as shaft mimicry, right? You got a shaft that says it's one thing, it looks like one thing, but it's actually something different. The first one is this Fujikura Speeder 665. This was produced and installed in a major manufacturer's driver a few years ago. And you look at this shaft and you think, well, that looks like the actual Speeder shaft that was $300 or $400 at the time. High-end premium shaft that you saw on tour. And if you didn't know any better and you only maybe knew that there was a Speeder shaft and it kind of looked like that and it had some numbers on it, you would think, yeah, that seems like the real deal. Unfortunately, this is the actual shaft. Fujikura Speeder 661. Now, people who didn't know any better wouldn't know that the 661, that's the actual weight designation, that's the actual designation for this particular model of this shaft. You had the 757, you had the 661, you had the 569. These were different weight designations. But people who didn't know that wouldn't know that it was 661, not 665. But this is how both the shaft company and the club company, which in this case was Callaway, sort of tried to pull one over on you, honestly. I don't know how else to describe it, because here you have this shaft that looks almost identical to a very expensive Fujikura Speeder shaft. But if you look at the specs on this shaft, it is quite a bit different. The torque numbers are much higher, it's a much softer shaft, the profile is different. It's just not the same shaft, but it looks very similar. Okay, the next example, another Callaway product. This was, again, a few years ago. This Project X shaft. Now, what this shaft is supposed to be, or supposed to look like, is the Project X Hazardous T1100. It looks very much like that shaft. Unfortunately, this is not the T1100. This is the T800. Again, changing the number slightly. So again, you've got a shaft that looks just like a premium, very popular aftermarket shaft, but it is in fact something that in no way other than the paint job resembles that shaft. But people will see it and they'll say, that looks like the shaft that Phil Mickelson was using, and they'll think it's the same. Well, in case you're thinking now that, well, that was a few years ago, and I'm sure that, they're not doing that sort of thing now. This is a shaft that's a current shaft offering as a stock option for a tailor-made product. And as you can see, this is part of their Tensei line, the Tensei Raw line, that looks just like a number of other Tensei Raw products. Unfortunately, once again, if we go and start looking at the numbers, the standard Tensei Raw Blue is a 65-gram shaft. But this is not the Mitsubishi Blue Raw 65. This is the 60. Now, you can't find any information on the 60 on the Mitsubishi website, so I don't exactly even know where this shaft falls or how it got made. But it's very clearly not the exact same shaft, but it is meant to look just like the 65. Okay, now I've got a third category here that I'm going to show you. And let me just say right now, this is just my opinion. I do not have any factual evidence to back this up. But it definitely makes sense when you look at how the club companies, the shaft companies, have gone about doing business when it comes to the shafts they provide. And that is what I would call made-for OEM shafts. Now, when I say a made-for OEM shaft, what I'm saying here is this is a shaft that is marketed and priced as a premium aftermarket shaft, but it's artificially marketed and priced at that point. It is not actually containing the same high-end materials, the same technology that some of the other high-end $300, $400 aftermarket shafts are. It's being marketed that way and then being offered as a stock option. Now, this has benefits for both the club company and the shaft company. The club company likes it because they get this aftermarket high-end shaft in their club at the standard, base price. The shaft companies like it because they can make one shaft. They don't have to make a different shaft for each particular brand. They can sell it to whoever, and they can market it. They can sell it at this high price point. So the few shafts that they sell independently, not to the club makers, they make more money on that way. Few different shafts I think kind of fall into this category. One of them being this Aldila Rogue White that sort of just appeared out of nowhere. You had the Aldila Rogue Silver, you had the Aldila Rogue Black, and all of a sudden this Aldila Rogue White shows up with this, I think, $350 MSRP, but is a stock option in one of last year's drivers. Here's another option. This Project X Hazardous Smoke IM10 shaft. Again, this shaft, if you look, $350 to buy it, but it is again a stock offering from different manufacturers. So, if you think that the manufacturers of these clubs are going to give you a $350 shaft for the same price as, whatever, a cheaper made for shaft, they're not. That's just not going to happen. So the way that they're doing this, I think, is that this shaft has been artificially inflated to this price to sort of just give it more prestige, make it sound better because it's more expensive, even though it actually isn't. All right, two last things I'm going to say real quick. First is, I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying that these shafts that come as stock options in these drivers, fairway woods, hybrids, are bad shafts, because I don't think that at all. I think these shafts are actually excellent for the most part. I think most of them are exceptionally good. In fact, I would argue that over the last 15, 20 years, if you take the shafts in the sort of mid-range, the shafts that are offered as stock options, and compare them to today's versus the ultra premium shafts from 15 years ago versus today's, I think the mid-range shafts are much better now as far as comparatively speaking versus what they were then. Secondly, I just want to say, I understand that the shaft manufacturers and the club manufacturers are in a difficult spot because they're having to walk this tightrope, because people want to have, the same driver as Rory McIlroy or the same shaft as Dustin Johnson, even though in most cases that shaft isn't going to work for them. And I get all that. But at the same time, this has been a very deceptive, a very shady, smoke and mirrors, a lot of sleight of hand sort of deal for a long time. And I don't think it needs to be this way. It doesn't have to be so deceptive. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's changing. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please go down below, give it a thumbs up, and also if you have not already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you'll be alerted when I post new videos. I'm on Instagram at Mobile Clubmaker. If you've got questions, if you've got comments, I'd love to hear them. Leave them down below. Until next time, take care. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.